For fuck's sakes, it looks fresh. Winston had bought a selection of fresh fruit and vegetables from one of the local farmers. The farmer's wife, actually. They'd harvested them the day before and had only travelled into town that day to sell them. How can it taste like this? The apple's skin was crimson red and plump to the touch, but a bite revealed mushy spots and it oozed a sour liquid on his tongue. He'd even tested a lettuce leaf before purchasing, snapping a leaf off from the dense head with a satisfyingly fresh crunch, but as it entered his mouth, it seemed to feel slimy and tasted like dirt. He fell to a slump, his long, dirty nails clawing through his untamed locks of hair. Cradling his face in his hands, he began to softly sob. His hunger was growing, his stomach crying out with pangs of pain. He had to feed soon, otherwise the lunar cycle would force his hand, and it was already midday. Grabbing his bedraggled coat, moth-eaten and full of holes, he stormed out of his wooden hut, slamming the door behind him. The walk through the woods was long and off the beaten path. It was safer for everyone else. However, the long trek caused those hunger pangs to hit harder and harder. He hadn't eaten in days, not since forcing down a handful of forest berries. By the time he made it to town, his vision had begun to blur, and that non-stop itching behind his ear had come back. It was almost time. Dusk would be descending soon. The stalls of fresh produce from local farmers made his stomach retch. He'd loved the contents of their baskets and buckets. They'd been his main supply until the incident, but now they caused a small batch of bile to bubble up and down his throat. His eyes hungered for something else. They were drawn to the butchers. Long flanks of pork and beef, whole chickens, giblets and all. Even the pig's ears and bones used to feed the local stray dogs made his mouth water. He'd been vegan for years and had ignored these stalls for all that time, finding the moral complexities of eating another living creature agonizing to his soul. Now, though, they were all he wanted, but he couldn't bring himself to spend his last gold piece on something that tortured his psyche. Instead, he returned to the farmer's stall, grabbed as much as he could, and fled for home. As he found his way through the brush and bracken, winding through the large oak trees, he soon found his way to his hut, but needed to hurry. The locks wouldn't turn themselves, and he had to make sure he couldn't harm anyone else. But as his hand touched the handle, his heart sank. It's open. Welcome home, dog boy. We'd heard rumours of monstrous things in the woods, but who knew we'd find you out here? Goro said with a vile smirk. Who knew a freak who had a distaste for meat would hunt and howl with the moon? A sharp pain shunted itself down his arm as a crunch rocketed through his spine, both starting the elongating process. Get out! Go! Please! He begged, pleaded with the intruders in his hut, themselves armed to the teeth with pikes, spears and swords. Why would we do that? It was the last sentence he remembered hearing, but as his senses, sanity and sentience returned to him with the rising sun, he was greeted with a grim sight. Lifting Goro's head, he could only wipe away the sinew and tissue still stuck to his mouth. Wiping away a tear, he uttered a pained sentence. It's your fault.